We're here to talk about Bill Cosby. Mr. William H. Cosby has been released from prison. You got a lot of people who happy about it, and you got a lot of people who mad about it. So we ain't even finna waste time. Let's go ahead and get into it. Pat, you the resident researcher, historian, so you lay the groundwork. What the hell happened in this Bill Cosby case that allowed him to get out?
Well, this is what we're gonna do, right? Because I got the question that everybody really want to know the answer to, right?
What's that?
It ain't why he got out. It ain't how
Mm-hmm.
he got
Mm-hmm.
out. It ain't what we
Mm-hmm.
think about it. It ain't
Mm-hmm.
none of that. All of
Mm-hmm.
that's irrelevant. The real question is,
What's that?
how the hell
Mm-hmm.
does William become Bill? That's the question. That is the question that we all want to know the answer to. And if you stick around and watch the whole thing, you still won't know the answer to that question. But anyways, so this is what we're doing, right? Back in 2005, the woman Constant, she filed charges against Cosby. Then she went to the police. They filed charges against Cosby. Then the DA at the time, the DA didn't think that he had enough to prosecute Cosby, so he offered him immunity from a criminal trial in order for his deposition. Just be honest about what happened, and we won't prosecute you. So he was honest about what happened, and years later, Me Too movement happens. Everybody's all caught up in just wanting to convict somebody. They don't care how they get a conviction. This sealed deposition was unsealed and used to prosecute Bill Cosby. So the Supreme Court stepped up and basically said, yeah, no, you can't do that. That's a violation of procedure and it's a violation of his amendment or his constitutional protections. And so they said the only way to repair this is to let him out. And he is now, they're also now barred from pursuing another prosecution against this victim. And let's keep in mind that this potential victim, this alleged victim, is the only real victim that they had any meat on, which is why they kept coming back to it. So that's where we stand now. He's out, he's free. It doesn't mean that he didn't do it. Doesn't mean he did do it. Doesn't mean there was any new evidence. It just means they violated his constitutional rights, and he got out of prison for
Okay, so I have a question for either one of you that want to answer this.
it.
In the deposition where they say he said what happened, did he admit to giving drugs to the young lady, or did he admit to drugging the young lady? That's my question.
Oh,
PC, you want that one?
oh yeah. He admitted to offering, I believe it was Benadryl and a Quaalude
Mm-hmm.
on several different occasions. Offered, and the actual witness, or some of the witnesses, even, or some of the women who alleged that he drugged them, acknowledged to receiving the pill through him giving them the pills, not putting it in their drinks, this, that, and the other. The whole concept about him drugging them came from an off-color joke that I think he did on a talk show one night. So that's the notion that's where a lot of that comes from. But in terms of what was in the deposition, he never stated or admitted to secretly drugging anybody. So, and this is all basically what you would consider to be consensual. That, as far as anything that he acknowledged, that's as far as I believe he went in terms of acknowledging the use of drugs during any of these encounters with, these various women.
Okay, so just to make sure we got it clear. So what Cosby did in giving the Benadryl and the Quaaludes, we can equate that to if somebody's chilling with a young lady and they pass her a joint and she willingly smoked the blunt with them.
Pretty much. I mean, the meat of all of this happened at a time where people were living fast and loose.
Right.
This was during the time of the disco, the clubs, the parties. in the 70s. The 70s was a wild time, and it's so wild that people nowadays really can't understand. The 70s was the era of the sexual revolution. It was also the era of free sex. It was the era of utopian societies. It was the era of open drug dealing. Like literally, you go to clubs and they would have tables with mirrors. The tables would actually be mirrors so that people could line up lines of cocaine. So these times that we're talking about, I mean, the era of pornography got started in the 70s. It didn't get started in the 70s, but it got a major turbo boost in the 70s. And a lot of us really can't understand. I mean, we look at how we look at now, Hot Girl Summer and City Girl Summers and all this, that, and the other. And we look at that as wild. In the 70s, that was happening. The swinger clubs, the swinger couples, all those things was happening. The culture was so much different than what you have right now.
Okay. But yes, to my question, or no.
Repeat the question.
Because I mean, not because you provided context, and I do appreciate the context.
Well, the answer to your question was yes. It's similar to offering somebody
because it's the drug of the time.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So do we remember how this all started? Like with the comedian Hannibal Buress going. Well, he did it at a show, a live show or something. He went and started all this, saying that Cosby drugged the women.
No, he had actually been telling that joke for a while. That skit, that bit, he had been doing that bit for a while. And maybe PC can enlighten more because I know he's more up to speed on that. But I know he had been doing the bit for a while, and it just caught on.
He had been, but there were a lot of other things that happened that, we really need to pay attention because a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight is above most people's pay grade in terms of the ability to absorb. It's like when you talk about the ability to, handle information, and there's certain levels of classification that make things classified. A lot of things we're going to talk about in this brief segment is going to be way above people's pay grade to understand. This is not a simple case of sexual assault that was taken to trial. This case was, you had a lot of political ramifications behind this. I'm not even going to speak to the whole notion that Bill Cosby was trying to buy NBC. I'm not going to even bring that up. But I mean, there were some issues with with his property. For one, his property, he had held up a very important a very big oil company that wanted to run a line through his property. There were some considerations in terms of who did the initial investigation. Why all of a sudden, after all this time, did people come forward? And there's a lot of politics that played in this. And I know a lot of people are saying things like, well, 50 women can't say the same thing. Well, 50 women didn't say the same thing, for one. There were multiple, very different scenarios that took place, and a lot of them had nothing to do with actual sex itself, But one of the things that I think we need to really understand is there was a huge, a huge issue with the prosecution of this case, and its tie into the district attorney, the former the district attorney, and
detail.
And the judge. They had a nasty political race about 15 years ago. And from what I gather, it was so bad because the judge had lost the prosecution. I believe while the race was going on, the judge was having an affair with somebody on his staff. And the prosecutor at the time, the DA at the time, had that woman come into court one day because she was working on the judge's staff. Had that woman come in court and sit next to his wife during some of the trials. So they had a nasty, and this is one of the biggest reasons why the deposition was open. Was the deposition that was supposedly protected by the Fifth Amendment was unsealed because there was an issue with the judge and the prosecutor, the former prosecutor that actually agreed to the terms of the deposition. So there's a lot that happened in this case that is not surface level. One thing I will say, and I'll go back to the 50 women, it doesn't take a lot for white women to get on code when it comes to destroying black men. There's a historical context that's interestingly being ignored. It's ironic that this particular, situation when it comes to addressing black men, and white women have been able to weaponize their whiteness in terms of bringing down black men. And you can go back to Emmett Till. You can go back to all of the various boom towns that black people had post Reconstruction, the Reconstruction era, and which led to a lot of the racial massacres. There was always a false accusation of sexual assault, rape, or some type of misconduct from a white woman accusing a black male. And that in return, they did a historical study and found out that that there have been no evidence to prove that these men actually raped these women. So, there's a lot to take into consideration when you look at this. And there's also a precedence that we need to pay attention to, because this wasn't just Bill Cosby on trial. This was Joseph Ward on trial. This was Patrick Irvin on trial. This was Professor Carl Tone Jones on trial. This was any black woman's husband, any black woman's father, any black woman's son, any black woman's nephew or uncle or cousin on trial here. This is way bigger than Bill Cosby, because as we'll begin to uncover, I'm sure, the fact that there was so little evidence and it was all circumstantial evidence, basically he said, she said evidence that was actually used in not one, but 2 illegal trials, because that's why he was able to come home. It was 2 illegal trials. Just speaks to the fact that it could have been any one of us. And we don't have the resources that Bill Cosby has. We don't have the big name and the stature that Bill Cosby has. And when all of these things happened, he was not America's dad. And it's something else very important to point out, because a lot of people will say, well, he was a powerful man and this, that, and the other. Listen, the president of the United States was once a black man. He served 2 terms. Now, I didn't see any instance in which if they could have taken him down, they would have. If he wasn't a squeaky clean president in terms of his image, they would have taken him down. Last I checked, Bill Cosby didn't have any elected office. He didn't have any of those protections. So, and at the time that all of these things happened in these accusations, he was not seen as America's dad. This was prior to the Cosby Show. So, there's a lot to dig into.
Yeah, it's a lot of historical things that people need to look at. It's a lot of real facts, real context. I didn't look deep into it. I know we talked about it. I apparently I didn't look as deep into it as I thought I did, because apparently not, because from my understanding or my viewpoint, he was convicted because of the deposition. So I didn't know that the deposition was illegal, though. So
it's not that the deposition was illegal. The reopening of the sealed deposition was illegal.
Yeah, the unsealing of the deposition was illegal.
Well, right. Because he said, if you tell me what happened, then we'll close this off and it'll never be used. But then it was used. So you're right. The unsealing of it. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I mean, is this a blow to the Me Too movement? Is this something good for black men? Like, what are we getting from this?
My personal opinion, on a very shallow level, it is a blow to the Me Too movement, but it is not a win for black men. This is why I say that. Because of all of the things that PC illustrated that Bill Cosby has that most black men don't. The resources, the social influence, because while it did seem like a lot of people was going to war and throwing Bill Cosby out, Bill Cosby still had a lot of supporters, a lot of people standing up for him, a lot of people speaking out for him. We just heard about one very high profile black woman that stood by his side and lost her job and is being crucified
Hey,
currently.
hey, I just want to say something like this. Yeah, Howard has a history of firing black people who stand up for black people and blackness. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing was one of them. When she wrote some of her papers, Howard fired her, and there's a host of other black people who Howard, we this not the HBCU show, but Howard has a history of doing something like, hey, Felicia, come on down to FAMU. But go ahead.
And get fired there too.
Well, yeah, I'm lying. Yeah, I know, because they're the same. You're right, they're the same. I just me talking, but it's just crazy. But no, not to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
But it's just crazy how that happened. It's like we see what happened. We see how it played out. There's no evidence. There's no real evidence to show that Bill Cosby is a sexual predator. Though the narrative is he's a sexual predator who got away, and it's like, well, show the evidence of him being a sexual predator. Only evidence that we have is the man he willingly gave somebody a Quaalude in the Benadryl.
Well, this is what you're getting into is why I say, and I'm not going to speak to whether or not Bill Cosby actually did or didn't do anything, because I wasn't there. I don't know. That's always been my stance. But my stance has also always been, if you're going to accuse somebody of something like this and absolutely destroy their life, and Bill Cosby's life was destroyed,
you got to have hard evidence.
You got to have something realer than emotions and a bunch of people telling the same story, which that logic never really made much sense to me anyways, because after I see what you said, how is it difficult for me to then parrot exactly what you said? That doesn't make much sense to me. But like PC said, these are not women that are all telling the exact same story. They all, that a lot of them have different situations, different things going on. But the reason why I say it's a blow to the Me Too movement, and we know that the Me Too movement has been losing steam. We know that the feminism movement has really been losing steam. It never really gained a lot of traction amongst the masses of women. And I think a lot of that silent majority has started to kind of be like, all right, y'all taking this a step too far. Y'all going kind of silly with it. I think a lot of that has been accentuated by the comedianification. I don't even know if that's a word or not, but the jokification of woke. I think all of these things are kind of coming together to where American society as a whole is just kind of being like, all right, enough. We entertained y'all long enough of the bullshit. But you look at like why he got convicted was because a DA, in this particular instance, the social pressure and everything was so great, they were willing to do anything to get a conviction. Anything that they could do to get a conviction, even if that meant violating somebody's constitutional rights and opening themselves up to this happening. Because we actually talked about this potentially happening when he got convicted. We were having conversations about this potentially being overturned because of what happened with the deposition. Yeah. So they were, and you can't convince me that the lawyers did not know this. You cannot convince me that they weren't aware that they were putting themselves in a position to have this happen. But what happened was they just didn't care.
I think it's a blow to the Me Too movement for a lot of things that both of you all have said, but they tried so hard to convict this man. Like they went clearly above and beyond to convict this man, and illegal means had to happen without hard evidence to prove what their narrative is, because they have a narrative and no hard evidence to prove that. So now you have this man being released because all of this information has come out about foul play. And so now the Me Too movement is looking like, okay, well, we said he was guilty. Well, yeah, he's still guilty. But all right, so people are now, okay, well, let's go look at the evidence now. Now, you still have some people who still in their feelings, but I don't
even know nobody's saying let's look at the evidence. I just think it was a blow to the Me Too movement because the courts basically said fuck your feelings.
Well, you're right. The masses of people not gonna go look at the evidence. We know that, but it's there to look at. So, and there's nothing that they have that can prove their narrative. So,
well, this was a witch hunt. Let's just call it what
yeah,
it was.
Right.
And this is a modern day lynching. You basically there was a character assassination that took place here. And I'm gonna go with something Pat said. I'm not necessarily speaking of to whether or not he did or didn't do any of this. I think that's probably, and I know this is going to sound insensitive, but the most irrelevant part of this discussion as to whether or not he did or didn't do. The problem is the fact that him being convicted initially after having a mistrial initially, and them
Right.
allowing women who did not have enough evidence to bring certified to validate their testimony. You brought 5 different women who brought stories to the table, but their stories were not credible by an actual conviction. And to allow them to make those accusatory statements in court to help solidify an illegal verdict is a very dangerous precedent. And see, that's
Right.
when you know that this is above most people's pay grade to understand, because you don't understand jurisprudent precedents when it comes to, judicial judicial rulings in the courts. And this is something that, say, if they hadn't overturned it, if somebody came to one of us with sexual assault, and how easy it is to for black men to be guilty and need a preponderance of the evidence to be proven innocent. How dangerous would that precedent have been if somebody can say, well, this evidence, we're not going to, admit this person into evidence, or their statement into evidence because it's unconstitutional. But if a court stated it was constitutional and it was upheld, then they can go back and say the state of Pennsylvania versus Bill Cosby in 2016 or whatever the case, 2018. This was allowed by and they can use that precedence to then prosecute the next brother who, and we know that unfortunately that black males are the highest targeted group of people when it comes to these witch hunts. And I keep calling the witch hunt because Gloria Allred and her daughter, went harder after Bill Cosby when you had other, people, specifically white men, like, Harvey Weinstein. There was a plethora of list of white CEOs and very powerful white men in positions of power. Let's not forget Jeffrey Epstein, right? That nobody was going after at this time. But this witch hunt with Gloria Allred and his daughter actually represented, by the way, and as a civil attorney, a civil rights attorney, she actually represented Harvey Weinstein. I want to just lay that out there too. So they created and crafted this list. They had women in blackface at the trials with women who weren't black, but they were Latina. They were giving them like skin tans and having them put on Afro wigs during the protest. During the trial, sitting right next to Gloria Allred. There was a lot of politics being played here, to satisfy a specific outcome here. So I think it's important that we truly understand all the mechanisms, and it really bothers me and disturbs me that we get into this emotional pitch, some of us, and it's really easy for us to tear down those of our own. I can care less about the status of Bill Cosby as a celebrity, and it's a shame that we have to even qualify for the fact that I was one of his biggest critics, during, prior to that, because
the pound cake speech.
Well, not just the pound cake speech, but he also had other situations here in Philadelphia where he attacked certain segments of our community, for which I felt as though he had the resources to assist in, but That's neither here nor there. The bottom line is I didn't look at Bill Cosby, the man. I looked at what Bill Cosby represented at that case. And he represented a black man being accused of something with very, very circumstantial evidence, very little circumstantial evidence. And the fact of the matter is, and it was an illegal case because his Fifth Amendment rights, supposed rights, Fifth Amendment rights were violated. And he had the resources, thankfully, to fight that. But for so many other people to use the this notion that we can convict people based on the court of public opinion, I just think that's really foul. And I think that especially for the black people who do that, I just hope your turn come up. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that boils down exactly why I really think it's the Me Too movement takes a hit here, because that whole movement is about the court of public opinion.
Right.
The whole movement is predicated on that.
Narratives.
Right. So Bill Cosby getting off, if you want to call it that, because he still served 3 years. He still had his name erased off a building.
Lost a lot. He lost a lot.
Like his life is the only thing he still has at this point is money, because his legacy is destroyed. Yeah. So they won, and they remain victorious in the court of public opinion, but the court of law said, no, we're not doing this. And I think that becomes a hit now, because it's kind of, actually, now that I think about it, in this neutral zone of kind of like, it's still a win for them, but it's like a setback.
Yeah,
because
it's a blow.
Yeah, because men aren't. It's going to be harder to get men put in jail, but we've also seen that it's still a narrative is still very, very effective in terms of destroying somebody's image, somebody's legacy, somebody's reputation, and that's something that we still have to be aware of, because a lot of us coming up still trying to make moves in the world. All we have is our reputation and our image until we get resources. That's all we have. So if somebody can come out with a story and take that away from you, you're essentially murdered before you get going.
Yeah.
Everything you stand for is killed before it even starts. And that's where I say it's a blow. It might be a little bit harder to do that now, but it's not a win for black men, because that is still on the table. They can still destroy you.
We live in a world when people walk around with access to all the information they ever need in their pockets and still believe narratives. Ain't that a bit? Hey, so
the way the brain's designed.
So before we wrap this up, just want to get some thoughts on the Judge Joe Brown, Mark Lamont Hill angle in this, because apparently Mark Lamont Hill is angry about this. He mad it happened, and Judge Joe Brown, Judge Joe Brown was on the show. Basically, it seemed like Judge Joe Brown had to explain the law to him, and Mark Lamont Hill was just mad. Well, what about this and what about that? So, like, what are y'all thoughts on that exchange between those two? Start with you, PC, because we got to make Pat talk.
Well, I'm just thoroughly disappointed in the brother, honestly. And I'm from Philly. I met Mark on several occasions. I'm just thoroughly disappointed, for a person who understands political education, understands racial politics, because, and there's some backstory to that. There is some issues between some not so good blood between him and Bill Cosby, Dr. Cosby.
Mark Lamont Hill.
Yeah, there's a history, there's some history that's resurfaced about, their entanglements. I'm not going to get into it because I don't know all the details, but I do understand that there's some history, some bad blood between the two. But, this is about being on code. And this is what we talk about when we talk about we can't really build, in the Black community, because we always have somebody who is going to put themselves ahead of the community. And once again, I say, if I had a personal beef with Bill Cosby at this time, or anybody, I'm not going to use that energy. I'm not going to use that situation to, saturate a poor narrative. And
So
that's what we're dealing with right now.
so you're saying he a lame
Well, see, I'm not gonna get into no
for that?
personal things,
No,
but I mean,
for that right
well,
there.
what I like I just said, I'll go back to being disappointed, because uh, the it's just the saying, it's just, like I said, it's bad because saying it, will propel other people to label you a rape apologist when the law stated no rape took place. And if we're not going to use the law, if we're just going to use accusations, then somebody can go and make an accusation right now about the same brother who is carrying this torch, in regards to the accusations that were made by his women. I think it's disingenuous to allude to the fact that white women don't get on code, especially during the Me Too moment when we have whole terms for white women getting on code. We have the term Becky, we have the term Karen, we have all these different terms for white women getting on code. I've been accused by white women of sexual harassment, and when the investigation took place, it was unfounded to the point where even a certain transportation company that offers buyer rides out here had to put out a mass email inbox to all of its drivers stating that racism and false accusations won't be tolerated. We have to be politically aware of who we're supposed to be and who we're supposed to deal with and who we're supposed to be loyal to. And if you can't be loyal to that, then you shouldn't be speaking out on any causes concerning our community, because you don't serve us no benefit. And it truly means that you'll put your emotions before the evidence, the real evidence, not accusations, but the real evidence and proof.
I thought Buddy looked real lame. I thought Buddy looked real crazy. Up there going back and forth with the judge, basically telling the world, I really don't understand the law because I'm just going off my emotion. Because I'm like, well, what about the people? Like, I don't get people's mindset. Like, we see what happened here. And so they're like, well, what about the people who were victims of sexual assault? Okay, well, people can easily say, well, what about the victims who were falsely accused? I mean, because it can get in that back and forth all day. But let's just be real and look at what exactly happened. And Buddy couldn't get his mind around that. He couldn't accept that. He was like, well, what this and that? And because he caught up in his emotions and he just wants something to happen because he's like, well, what about the victims? What about the victims? There are victims on either side. We're not going to fix this problem picking and choosing which side of the coin we want to save or which victims we want to ride for.
Well, there's some litigious issues with that too. They're not victims; they're alleged victims. And once again, we're going under this notion that white women are always honest when it comes to dealing with black men concerning the term of sexual assault.
Well, that's where I'm at.
I mean,
and even go ahead, Brad. I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead, PC. Go ahead. You cooking?
I was just saying, even I think the only black woman that really testified that was actually a black woman was Barbara Jordan, and she acknowledged that he never raped her. What I mean? Her thing was, I got drugged and then he carried me out to the cab and put me in the back seat of a cab and sent me home. And here's the thing too, that if you're gonna come, like I'm not even gonna do this. I'm not even gonna say what I was about to say because certain things are just common sense, but common sense is not common in this. In the age of cancel culture, there are some people who are just miserable with their own lives, so they live to do destructive things to other people. So I'm not even gonna give them no ammo tonight.
Well, I think for me, I was disappointed. I'm gonna be honest. I'm disappointed in there are good and bad people on both sides. All right. A wise philosopher once said that one of the wisest presidents we've ever had in the history of this nation, the glorious and honorable Donald J. Trump, said that there are good and bad people on both sides. And to me, I'm disappointed with with people celebrating just as much as I'm disappointed with people crying, because like PC said earlier, the actual rape part of what is happening right now is probably the most irrelevant piece of this conversation. Whether or not he actually did anything, like we've had that conversation and we can keep having it. That conversation is never going to go away because none of us are never going to know. We're not. What happened here is not about guilt or innocence. It's about the fact that they were so desperate to convict somebody that they violated the law to do it. And now we're coming to a conversation where we're asking ourselves, is that okay? And there are a lot of people saying, yes, that is okay. And there are a
Right.
lot of people saying, no, that's not okay. But I think that's the conversation. And that's what's disappointing to me about those people saying, well, what about the victims? This has nothing to do with whether or not Bill Cosby allegedly raped or assaulted or otherwise sexually mistreated your client. This has everything to do with the fact that you and your cohort were willing to violate his rights and make him a victim in order to get a conviction. And I think
Mhm.
that's the disappointment that I feel looking at a Mark Lamar Hill who is supposed to be an intellectual in the community, somebody that can push forth a logical argument and back the emotions and the sentiments that black people feel with historical and real fact. Now you have him basically just jumping on board the train and trying to ride with people in order to get brownie points in a social movement that would just as easily take him down if he
Mhm.
gets too far in the way.
Yep.
To me,
Yep.
that becomes a problem. Everybody, not just black men, but black women as well. Everybody should be looking at this and saying, I don't care if he did it or not. They were wrong for the way they went about trying to get a conviction, and it's concerning that they were willing to go this far to get a conviction, and it's concerning that they're willing to continue to spin a narrative even after the illegality of their behavior was brought to light. Nobody has apologized for violating this man's constitutional rights. Nobody has even provided a real reason as to why they felt like it was okay to violate his constitutional rights. Nobody has presented any sort of logical argument as to why it would be okay to throw out the conditions and the terms under which he made the deposition in order to get a conviction now. And there aren't
Mhm.
many people even having that conversation. That's the disappointment that really this whole thing shows. And this is where I do agree with PC. We're not ready. We're basically cavemen that just got introduced to blowtorches.
Ooh,
Yeah. Yeah.
fire.
I mean, when you look at the emotional reaction, the emotional overturns, this whole trial was based on how easy it is to
Emotions.
manipulate the emotions of black people. I want to be clear about that. If this whole trial, I mean, I even watched prior to the conviction when the first trial was going on. TV1 had a show with Roland Martin, and it was a panel of sisters on there. One of the first thing a sister said on the show was, "Well, Bill Cosby's blatant disrespect for black women is on full display right now." And I'm thinking to myself, which one? Like, which black woman, other than if you want to say his wife, who seemed to be pretty supportive of her husband? That's their intermarital
It's this stuff.
issue. That's the functionality of their relationship. You know, but it was easy to twist it and turn it into a hatred for black women. It was easy to even bully black women who defended him, such as a Felicia Rashad, right?
Mm-hmm.
To bully her from her position. This woman's 73 years old. You know, the money is not what matters. What mattered to her was being able to, be an influential face in front of black students at Howard University. And the fact that you had this third wave, fourth wave of feminism, the concepts and mindsets which the first and second wave of feminists vehemently opposed, by the way. Just want to be clear about that. When you talk generations of feminism, the first and second waves of feminism are vehemently opposed to what they see going on right now, as feminism is used as an attack dog on anybody and anything. It doesn't even attack just men anymore, So the fact that you have Felicia Rashad, who had to practically recant what she said, she didn't necessarily rebuke what she said in terms of supporting Bill Cosby, but she said, she had to write an apology letter and then offer to do like training and whatever. I'm like, this is bullshit.
I just think it's all bullshit. Like, I get from her position why she put out the apology tweet, but she simply tweeted that an injustice was righted, which was the truth. But once again, like we all saying, people in their feelings, well, they exactly what people saying. Well, what about the victims? What about the victims? What about what about the people who've been done wrong? Can we concentrate on that? All right, well, guess what? All right, how y'all fired her? That's y'all loss. First of all, y'all called her. She ain't called y'all. Y'all went after her. She don't need y'all. All right, that's Felicia Rashad. I just wanted to get that off my chest. Felicia Rashad don't need no goddamn Howard. All right.
Yeah, but Howard is still going to be considered a prestigious HBCU. Is one of the premier HBCUs on the planet.
It ain't better than FAMU, and she's still alive.
Well, in the hypocrisy, right? Because these accusations have been around since the 80s. And the hypocrisy of Howard is they still accepted his money during that time. If they felt so strongly about it, then I believe that they are inclined to send him a refund check plus interest for all the money he's given to Howard University.
I think they did send him a check, not interest, but I think they did refund some of his money, not all of it.
I think like the last donation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nah, give it all up. Give it all up.
But I think that speaks to
stand 10 toes down.
Yeah, but you look at it like as times have progressed and new people have gotten in charge, everybody's so worried about the narrative, their opinion, the public perception. Everybody's so worried about that. Truth is irrelevant right now. Highly irrelevant. Nobody cares about truth. Everybody cares about what they see. And we see this manifesting.
How they feel.
All right. We see this all over the place. Social media is basically one big fuck the truth. How do you feel?
Yeah. Yeah.
Despite blatant information to disprove how you feel, people still go off of how they feel.
We see it on social media posts, how people will change will move the goalposts just to be able to make their argument relative, and it has nothing to do with some of the things you put out there. They want to change the conversation so it's favorable for them because they can't really articulate an effective debate with you on the issues and the topics. And we're seeing it in real life. We're seeing so many people who, take a narrative, distort the narrative, perverse the narrative, and to create a different narrative that basically fits an agenda. And I think that people are stupid. I'm just going to call it what it is.
That didn't fit right there.
I don't really give a flying about how articulate a person speaks. I don't care if you have read a whole bunch of books. I don't care if you think you have digested. If you are acting off of raw emotion, then that speaks to a primitive mindset. That speaks to the ability to be manipulated. And then the fact of the matter is people get that feeling, invest in that feeling, and they double down on that feeling rather than acknowledge they were wrong. And instead of just saying, hey, I was wrong, I messed up, I made a mistake, people are too, they put themselves out there publicly. So they got to stand behind. It's like bullshit. Sorry, I'm trying not to cuss. Yeah. BS, right?
Bullshit.
Everybody invest in their BS, right? And they try to get you not to just um uh uh like the aroma, but
Like
they
the
want
bullshit.
you, they want you to double down on their bullshit too. They want you to buy into their bullshit too. But it's bullshit. And we got too many people who are comfortable with this. And the real thing, it speaks to cowardice. People are
Right.
cowards. It takes a really courageous
No, I
person,
agree with that.
yeah, to say I was wrong. It takes a really courageous person to say, "Hey, I messed up," and I'm going to be just as loud about saying I messed up as I was about accusing somebody of some shit they didn't, that we don't know if they did or not. You know, I'm going to be courageous enough to stand by somebody who has principles, not somebody who's wavery. You know, because and Mark, come on, man, because when them Jews came for you, I'm sorry, the J words came for you. You changed your tone on Palestine, brother.
Pat,
Let's be real about this.
you
You
got
know
to
what I'm
beat
saying?
that out, Pat.
So,
Bleep
you know what I'm saying? The
bullshit.
J word. Trying not to,
Bullshit.
Hey,
I did a whole show on lessons from the screen talking about Jews. I ain't bleep none of that out. So
hey.
whatever.
So,
yeah, so
but
No, but I agree with what PC's saying though, because I give an even simpler example of how uncomfortable people are accepting truth. Look at all of the body modification apps and filters and shit all over the place. These motherfuckers can't even accept their own body. Your belly
mm-hmm.
poke out. You got cellulose. You ain't that slim. You ain't that muscular. You ain't that whatever it is. You got motherfuckers lightening their tone. Mark Lamar Hill in the video looked like a clown with the make. He literally with the makeup he had on. I'm not talking shit about how you look, bro. But whoever did your makeup that day, you look clownish. So, but and I understand people say they do that for the lighting, for this, for that, for the blah, blah, blah. That's what people say. We watch YouTube videos regularly now with people who have decent lighting, use no makeup, and look totally fine. So, why we can't even do that, but it just speaks to people's inabilities to accept any level of truth at this point, unless it's a truth that they
hey,
agree with.
hey, because y'all stupid and stop being stupid. People just got to stop being stupid. And that's all we got to say about that. That's all we got to say about that. So Bill Cosby is now out because an illegal process of opening a sealed document out of desperation to get him convicted. That was illegal. So he's out. And if you don't like that, you need to talk to the people who opened the seal.
Well, hold on, Joe.
Sucker.
I know you're about to go off, but
Hey,
it
y'all
was
told me keep
more
it short.
No, we're gonna keep it short, but it was more than just the document itself. The legal precedents that was used, they used 5 witnesses that didn't have actually cases behind them, that didn't have even civil cases behind them to bring him out, to use as witnesses and things. That there was a whole bunch of prosecutorial misconduct, and there was a beef between the prosecutor and the judge. So
all of that, what I said, and all that, all in the soup and the sandwich.
right.
And that's what happened. They had to see how hard they worked to bring us down. You see how hard they worked to bring us down.